What makes a life worth living?
Very good question. What a good way to end. A lot of things, I think. I think the most obvious one is to have meaningful relationships with people you love, um, to find around you relationships of depth with your family, your loved ones, your partners, your friends. Not to chase ephemeral and shallow relationships, but deep ones. And that requires work. It requires time, commitment, and much more. But it'll reward you far more than however many thousands of likes you get on Instagram from total strangers who won't notice you when you're gone and didn't notice you much when you were here. I think it is to immerse yourself in your time, but not to be a creature of your time. There's a quote of Schiller I'm very fond of. He said, "Be a part of your century, but do not be its creature." Reach for truth, and know that it's not a game, that it's not something you do for its own sake, but because it'll get you somewhere. Search for meaning, not because the search is the point, but because there is meaning, and that you should try to find it. Make sure that by the end of your life, you are wiser and know more than you did at the start. Don't find yourself in that pitiful situation of not knowing what you did or what it was about. Try to find your place in the universe and try to find some peace with it. Search for the big questions and immerse yourself in them. If you don't believe in God, try to work your way towards the things that are God-shaped. And don't waste your time. That isn't to say, by the way, that you spend your entire life, or we should spend our entire life, involved only in the deep questions. But don't skip them. Don't spend all your time on Instagram and ignore the unbelievable wealth of knowledge and human wisdom and beauty that has been given to us and which we've inherited from amazing men and women who've gone before us. We have an extraordinary opportunity in this generation. We have access to all the world's music for free. We have access to almost all the world's literature almost for free. And that's not a small thing. I would always say, as somebody who's deeply immersed in the arts, that one of the purposes of the arts is not just to distract us in some way, but that it points us towards truth. So read, listen, study, and live as much as you can, as fulsomely as you can. And that would be a life well lived, or at least the start of finding your way to that.
Yeah, it's comparatively straightforward. If I look at all of the resources that will be spent on me, things that will never be recovered, that's an amount of debt. And I strive to be in surplus. That is to say, to return more to the world than the cost that is implied by my existence. And when I reach people, when I increase the amount that they can understand about what they see, about what life means, about why it's difficult in certain ways, if I improve their lives, it eats away at that debt, and life will have been worth living if I end up in surplus, having created more well-being than I have burned up.
I think the answer to that, for most people, and I stress most people, is their children and grandchildren. We're very, very motivated as a species by our immediate offspring and their welfare, their flourishing. Of course, not everybody has children, and not every family is happy, but that's a very big part of the answer, and it certainly is for me. Beyond that, I think one cannot really feel that life is worth living until one has a meaningful connection to both the dead, the past, and the unborn, the future generations we will never meet. This was Edmund Burke's great insight and reflections on the revolution in France, that the real social contract has been between the living, the dead, and the unborn. A culture that does not make you feel an intense connection to both the dead and the unborn is a culture that fundamentally undervalues humanity. We as individuals we're like mayflies. We have a relatively short lifespan in the great scheme of things. That life cannot be meaningful if it is entirely focused on our own gratification, our own accumulation of wealth, or whatever it is. And even if all we do is look after ourselves and our kids, that's not enough. It's about the people we don't know, don't meet, the dead and the unborn. And history, the study of history, is one way that I find I can best commune, not only with those vanished generations. The great majority of human beings are dead, after all, who ever lived. It's only about 7% who are currently alive. But also history gives one a sense of what posterity might possibly think about us. I mean, who in 100 years will be writing the history? I don't know. Maybe there'll be no history. But if there is history to be written in 100 years or 200 years or 300 years, it's important for us to ask ourselves right now, what will they say? And are we acting in a way that will get us good or bad press when those future histories come to be written?